Number 6 of 7, Awful Universe yet Awful University. The goal of this episode is to make the case that the paradise takeaway source from Bereshit in beginning of Genesis 1:1 to 2:3 is the Kabbalah reception. Overall, there's a triad Kabbalah composed of the primeval or personal contribution, the medieval coming down to us from the dark Middle Ages, and the coeval as used in science today unknowingly. The assertion is proven by demonstrating a one-to-one equivalence between them by mapping. My quest for finding the reason behind the breakdown of civilization, as evidenced by the widespread crises that immerses us, drove me to the hermeneutics of the Mosaic creation story as in Bereshit in beginning of 1:1 to 2:3. The venture went from present-day modern science 20th and 21st centuries to the Enlightenment 18th century to classical Greece of the School of Athens 4th century BCE of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, to its pre-Socratic precursors in Ionia 6th century BCE, especially the Pythagorean school of thought and its secret sect, and eventually to archaic Judea-Israel 10th century BCE. So, by search and elimination, I finally arrived at the Hebrew Bible of the Mosaic tradition. At the heart lies the Torah teaching, the Pentateuch, the 5 books of Moses. In all, it is 3 layers thick, the triad known as Tanakh, Hebrew Bible, consisting of the Torah teaching, the Nevi'im, prophets, and the Ketuvim, writings. The idea is that the first text was revealed, the second inspired, and the third simply enlightened. My claim is that if there's a large T, Torah teaching, there must be an analogous small t, the paradise takeaway. Let me tell you what the problem is. At the end of the day, the question is, where does the discovery of the paradise takeaway fit in the greater picture of things? The dilemma was that Kabbalah reception is a study of Bereshit in head of 1:1 to 2:3, but so was paradise. Either I was seeing double or else both are somehow the same thing, each in its own way. But wait, if it's correct that the truth of things is that the triad of parts PRD becoming is one whole S, then it must follow that Kabbalah reception is a triad unto itself as well. At this point, I took a deep breath and a break and spent some time addressing nomenclature concerns. My understanding of things is that Moses received the Torah teaching. This is the source, insofar as it is revelation at Mount Sinai and allegedly is the blueprints of creation, if we ever figured out how to decode it. From this sprung the tradition otherwise known as the Kabbalah, which, as it says, is precisely the reception of the revealed tradition handed down from Moses to Joshua, to the elders, to the great assembly, and since passed on by and within a select group, but alternatively by all who care to study and keep it alive, as evidently was my case in point. Apparently, the canonical group, having no need to synthesize things, conformed itself with a spread-out version. The downside was that in abundance of information, it oversighted the paradise takeaway, which came at the very beginning of it all in 1:1 AA, as we saw in a previous episode. What I know from personal experience is that it's there for the taking, as my personal quest proved. In fact, it explicitly says so in Devarim, Deuteronomy 30:11 to 14. That settled, likewise, the Kabbalah out there before my times is certainly additionally the case. So, both the primeval and the medieval lay claim to authenticity, having been derived from the same source. But not only that, being a triad, there must be a third version out there, unawares of of its ancestral heritage, sort of born out of trial and error, out of a collective effort, empirical, cultural, but that works, constitutionary obviously, carried by word of mouth and passed on as by positive taboo. Like culture that feeds the university with the spirit, yet somehow the letter of the university in turn corrupting kills it, returning it as civilization. Hence, the present-day loop crisis in the world at large. Next came the naming game. Starting with Paradise version, I chose to call it primeval, being the case that it derives directly from the text Bereshit in Herav 1:1 to 2:3 in Genesis, and only from the text. And I don't say it out of rigor of modesty, rather that it's the depth of my lights. I couldn't possibly venture exploring the erudite maze of the whole word. In any case, the conspicuous one already out there, I chose to call it medieval, both for coming from the Middle Ages as well as for being mystical. It's what characterizes most things coming from the Dark Ages. That pretty much leaves the third one by the name of coeval, for lack of a better name for modern or contemporary. By the look of things, the medieval is sourced from the whole Tanakh Hebrew Bible, though invariably referring back to the creation story in Bereshit in beginning of Genesis 1:1 to 2:3. The coeval, as far as I know, isn't directly traceable to the source, to the best of my knowledge. The next task was to demonstrate the veracity of my intuition of this Kabbalah reception triad versions consisting of the primeval, the medieval, and the coeval or contemporary. Let's take it by turns, first in, first out, at least as far as applies to me. Since the first is paradise, the charge here is to explain the medieval in terms of the primeval, leaving the coeval till last once having identified it properly. Unrequired to say, in what follows the argument will be more qualitative than quantitative, keeping things to bare bones for purposes of clarity and celerity, leaving details aside. The medieval is called the tree of life model since it resembles a tree, plus its associations with a tree in the second creation story. Ours, by extension, I chose to call the seed of life model since it resembles precisely a pecan, given that it consists of a square husk and the lips shell and the right triangle kernel. By extension, overall, I choose to name the coeval the husk of life model in following the vitality nomenclature. But back to the medieval tree of life model of the Kabbalah reception. Let's lay out the basic array. Please see accompanying slide. The array chosen as prototype is the Ari, short for Isaac Luria, the Aryeh lion, celebrated Kabbalist from Safed, Israel, 16th century. This is not to say that it's the only one. Rather, it's the latest of a long line of outstanding thinkers. Now that we know what we're up to, about what is expected of us, the next step will be to present the paradise seed of life as triad of triads within a whole. The idea being that triad of triads is 3 times 3 gives 9, plus the one whole makes 10 in total. The tree of life has 10 Sefirot numbers to begin with, so it's a start in the process of matching by mapping. Please see accompanying slide. As you can see, we left out the Otiot letters but kept the Sefirot numbers for the sake of highlighting the geometry. The Otiot refer to the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, while the Sefirot to the 10 basic numbers of 1 to 10. This is important on account, as we saw in a previous episode regarding verse 1:1 BD, that, quote, created Elohim language with you, unquote, representing the Remez Remit reading of verse 1:1 of the Paradise Takeaway. Next will be to make the one-to-one correspondences between the Tree of Life medieval and the Seed of Life primeval models. Please see accompanying slide. In a very cursory manner, we'll leave things there as far as this primeval and medieval are concerned. Various adjustments had to be made in order to fit the medieval, in particular the triad of triads primeval compliance requisite. At least in certain regards, it is my belief that the one needing compliance is the medieval to the primeval, and not the other way around. For a more detailed explanation, there's always the books, The Principle 2018 and Pardecism 2016. Next would come first searching for and finding the missing member of the triad, the coeval. The problem is where to start. I don't claim having thought it out as such, rather it suddenly hit me. After all, I am a high school science teacher, and this is the kind of stuff that makes up my work. To cut to the chase, the runaway member is none other than the square notes scheme, of which there are many, amongst them Cornell notes, to my knowledge, though I never taught a course as such. At least that was what I originally thought, quite a discovery in itself. But wait, it took months for it to dig in that these square notes are, after all, a scheme that works. If so, then its particular use is hiding its more general use, which can be none other than as science, which works in general measure. I'll leave what's more I have to say on this topic to the closing episode on the university. Please see accompanying slide. Likewise, with a square array as with a triad going into the triad of triads, the next step was to do a square of squares layout. This coeval of life model hardly needs any introduction. All of us who've attended middle and high school have been introduced to study notes of one type or another. It is a system for taking, organizing, and reviewing notes. As quick refresher, the page is partitioned into four parts. At the top would go the heading, title, or theme. On the right side, the actual notes. On the left, the key concepts, and at the bottom of the page, the summary. The match between the primeval and the coeval is clearly visible, leaving little doubt. The final step is to place the Kabbalah reception triad side by side, consisting of the primeval, medieval, and coeval versions. This we now proceed to do. Please see accompanying slide. This pretty much wraps up our pretensions in this episode. Let's now recall what we've just accomplished. What we've demonstrated is the existence of the triad Kabbalah reception, consisting of the models primeval D, medieval R, and coeval P of one whole S. There is unity in diversity without a doubt. Well, we'll have to leave it here, having accomplished our charge. For lack of space and time, we'll leave the conclusion to the final episode of the leadership course. I have the calling to serve, the teaching of paradise to disseminate, and the mission of re-civilization to realize. Éntrale a la bola, no seas canica. Keep weird, folks. U.S. Senate Texas 2020 and the Nobel Peace Prize as soon as possible. In a nutshell, it's either paradise world right now, or else hell of dualism on earth for us all from here and now to eternity. Yours truly, Rick, and GD bless.